Good day, everybody. I hope that you are well and also hope that you are having a good day so far. Today, we'll be doing our grade 5 English lesson on adjectives that compare. And before we start with our lesson on adjectives that compare, we're going to log into aplusstudents.ca. Once we've logged on to aplusstudents.ca with our username as well as our password, and then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 5, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of adjectives that compare. So our chapter is adjectives that compare. Our subject is English language arts, grade 5, and the lessons that we are going to be focusing on today under the chapter of adjectives that compare, it's to use adjectives to compare and also to use adjectives with more and most. So you can use some adjectives to compare people. You can use adjectives to compare places, and basically you can use adjectives to compare things. So we use adjectives to compare people, places, or things, right? And then we have comparative adjectives and we have superlative adjectives. A comparative adjective, it compares to people, places, or things. And comparative adjectives, it ends in er. And then we have superlative adjectives that ends in, it's basically compare, it compares more than two people, places, or things. It ends in est. All right, so once again, you can use some adjectives to compare. We can compare people, places, or things. And we said we have a comparative adjective. And a comparative adjective, right? It compares two people, or it compares to places, or it compares to things. And a comparative adjective, it ends in er. And then we have a superlative adjective, right? And a superlative adjective, it compares more than two people, places, or things, and they end in est. All right. So when it comes to a comparative adjectives, right? We see the comparative adjective, it compares to people, places, or things, and they end in er. An example of that is he is taller than his sister. So basically, he is being compared to his sister, right? So it's like two people, him and his sister. So he's comparing himself to his sister in height, so which means that he is taller than his sister. And then we see the superlative adjective, it compares more than two people, places, or things, and they end in est. And if we compare two or more people, or two or more places, or two or more things, and then we can say he is the tallest person in class. And when we say he is the tallest person in class, it means that he is being compared to all the other people or all the other learners or students in class. So, which means that he's being compared to more than one person, right? And when it comes to comparative adjectives, right, comparing people, places, or things, you can use adjectives to compare people, places, or things. And we see the comparative adjective, it compares to people, to places, or to things that ends in er. Then we have superlative adjectives, right, which compares more than two people, places, or things, and they usually end in est. And then for most, right, so if you have a word that ends in like one, it has one syllable, right? So a word with one syllable, for example, tall. Tall has got one syllable only. So for most of our words that has one syllable adjectives, and for two syllables adjectives that ends in y, the comparative adjective ends in er. And when it comes to for most one syllable adjectives and for two syllable adjectives, right? We see that ends in y, the comparative adjective in, and then it basically ends in er, right? And then we have our base word, we have our comparative word, and we have our superlative word. So now we're going to identify first our base word, then our comparative, and then our superlative, right? So here we have our base word, a comparative adjective, and a superlative adjective. All right, so basically, we said for most one syllable adjectives and for two syllable adjectives that ends in Y, the comparative adjective ends in ER. And the superlative adjective ends in EST. Right? So now we have our base word, which is tall. So we have our base word, which is tall. And we say that if we compare someone or place or thing to another person or another thing, right? And then we call that a comparative adjective because we are comparing it to one another. And we can say our base word is tall, but now if we are comparing to another person, can be is taller. And then we have superlative adjective, right? And superlative adjective is where you compare more than two people, places, or things, which ends in est. So superlative ends in est. And for most adjectives with more than one syllable, all you need to do is to add more to make comparative adjectives, and we add most to make superlative adjective. So we add the word more to make a comparative adjective, and we add the word most to make a superlative adjective. So now we have our base word. Let me try to separate it. And then we have a comparative word, and then we have a superlative word. And our base word, right? This is where there's more than one syllable, right? For example, intelligent. Literally four syllables, right? So that is our base word. So if there's more than one syllable, right, then our base word, for example, will be intelligent. Then the comparative adjective, we will add more in front of it, will be more intelligent. And the superlative adjective, we add most in front of it, so which means that it is most intelligent. All right. And we are doing a tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. All right. So now we are back at the chapter which is adjectives that compare, and we're going into the first lesson, which is to use adjectives to compare. So you can use some adjectives, right? Like we said, to compare people, places, or things. And we have a superlative adjective and a comparative adjective. And we said comparative adjective, it compares to people, places, or things that ends in er. And a superlative adjective, it compares two or more people or places or things and they end in est. All right. So if we look at this sentence activity, right? It says we need to compile the sentence with the correct form of the adjective. It says the bread we had for breakfast was than the bread we had for dinner. We need to use these words to choose the correct one. Why do I put cold? All right, let's just go with sweetest and sweet. So the bread we had for breakfast was, do we say it was sweetest than the bread we had for dinner? Or the bread we had for breakfast was sweeter than the bread we had for dinner? Which one is the correct one? This is think of a comparative adjective. So if we look at the oopsie. So we need to choose between it is sweetest. I deleted now. Or you can say sweeter. Sweetest or sweeter. So we said now we are comparing breakfast and dinner, right? So we had, I'd say the bread we had for breakfast was sweetest than the bread we had for dinner, or the bread we had for breakfast was sweeter than the bread we had for dinner. We are comparing the two, breakfast and supper or dinner. So if we choose the correct one, we can say that the breakfast we had for breakfast, the bread we had for breakfast, it was sweeter. So that one is correct. It was sweeter than the bread we had for dinner. Right? Because remember, if we compare two things, two people, two places, and then our word ends in er, But if we compare more than two people, places, or things, and then our word ends in est, and in this case, they're only comparing the bread from breakfast time to now dinner time. All right, so now let's look at the next one. It says, did you think that Mrs. Alvarado's nephew was the, let me first choose two words. Do we say was the strong, oopsie. So was he the stronger or was he the strongest? So was he the stronger or strongest dancer in the whole dancing contest? So did you think that Mrs. Alvarado's nephew was the strongest or the stronger dancer in the whole dancing competition? And if we choose the correct one, we can say, did you think that Mrs. Alvarado's nephew was the strongest? So he's going to use strongest dancer in the whole contest. The reason why we're saying strongest is because he's being compared to all the other dancers in the competition, for example, or in the contest. So it ends in EST. All right, so now we're going on to our test. So we're going on to our test, right? And we are now going to complete the sentence with the correct form of adjective. Do you think that Shakespeare was the, do we say the greater of all writers? Or do you think he was the greatest of all writers? So we can say, do you think that Shakespeare was the greatest writer of all writers? And specifically, we say the greatest is because he's been compared to all writers, right? If you compare someone to more than one person, then we use EST. So the greatest. So well done. Greatest is correct. So well done. Well done. So the next one says when Gabby was in hospital, Nurse McGee was a lot, do we say a lot kinder or a lot kindest than Dr. Monroe? Yet two people are being compared. So do we say kinder or kindest? So kinda. Why do we say kinda? Is because Nurse McGee is being compared to Dr. Monroe. So we're going to say kinda is our correct word. So well done. Kinda is correct. All right. So we say, now we're going on to the next one that says, that statue is do we say is the grandest piece of art in the whole museum? Or that statue is the grander piece of art in the whole museum? So we can say the statue is and yes, grandest is correct. So it's the grandest piece of art in the whole museum, right? So well done. Grandest is correct. Sleepyhead Inn. So Sleepyhead Inn has the softest sheets or the softest sheets of all the hotels in Sparrow Town. So we can say Sleepyhead Inn has the, do we say softer sheets or softer sheets of all hotels in Sparrow Town, meaning that she's being compared to all the other hotels in Sparrow Town. And remember, if somebody is being compared to more than one person, thing, or animal, then we use the word est. All right, so we can say Sleepyhead Inn has the softest sheets of all in Sparrow Town. So softest is correct. So in the movie, the astronaut said that the distant planet was, do we say warmer than Earth or warmest than Earth? So the distant planet. So it's only being compared to Earth, so you will say distant, or let's say the warmer planet, sorry. So the warmer distant planet was, do we say it's warmer than Earth or warmest than Earth? So in the movie, we said the astronauts said that the distant planet was warmer than Earth. And yes, warmer is correct. So well done. So warmer is done because remember we're only comparing that to planets. And do you think that Mrs. Alvarado's nephew was the stronger or the strongest dancer in the whole dancing competition? So do you think, all right, that Mrs. Alvarado's nephew was the best, was the stronger or the strongest dancer in the whole dancing contest? And if we compare his dance moves or his dancing to the whole, or let's say to everybody in the dance contest, then we can say, do you think he was the strongest dancer? Because he is being compared to more than one person. So now we're going to use adjectives with more and most. And we say that if the word is like with more than one syllable, two or more syllables, we add most, right? So we start by strongest dancer. So you can use adjectives to compare people. We can use adjectives to compare places, things, right? And we have comparative adjectives, right? And we have superlative adjectives. And if we have more than one, actually, if we have one syllable and then as well as two syllable adjectives that ends in y, then then the comparative adjective will then end in er. All right. So now we're going to use more and we're going to use most, right? And if there's more than one, let's say syllables, then we either add more or most to it, or we can just have our base word, our comparative as well as our superlative adjective, right? Now let's just go to our test. So to complete the sentence with the correct comparative or superlative adjective, right? It says to Nicole, knitting is it is a interesting hobby than stamp collecting. So which means that we must not say is it an interesting or is it a more interesting or most interesting. So we can say to Nicole, knitting is a, I'm not sure if I need to put here more or most, but it is a interesting hobby than stamp collecting. All right. So we said that is, so to Nicole, knitting is interesting. So we can say it is more interesting because it's being compared, right, to stamp collecting. So we can say it is more interesting than stamp collecting. We now need to complete the sentence with the correct comparative or superlative adjectives. It says the new math teacher for our class is, do we say he's kind than the new one, kinder than the old one, or most kind? So is it kind, kinder, or most kind? So the new math teacher for our class is, do we say he's kind, kinder, or most kind than the old one? And if we compare him or her to the old one, we can say he's more kinder. It's kinder than the old one because we're comparing two people, right? So we say kinder. If you're comparing more than one person, then we say kindest. Even without a ruler, Jackson can draw a straight line than his younger brother. So do we say a straight or straighter line than his younger brother? So we can say that even without the ruler, Jackson can draw a straighter line. Remember, we are comparing, him to his brother. So if we compare him to his brother, then it is a comparative adjective, and then we say it is a straighter line than his brother. So straighter, right? Because remember, we are comparing him to someone else. As much as we do comparisons, right? If you're comparing someone to another person, we put er. The word ends in er. Or if we're comparing a person to more than two people, then we add a word, or we add est to our word. The angelfish is, do we say, is the more beautiful or the most beautiful fish in the aquarium at school? So the angelfish is the, do we say, more beautiful or is the most beautiful fish in the aquarium at school? So we can say the angelfish is the most beautiful fish in the aquarium at school. All right. So this is the end of our lesson on adjectives that compare. We said adjectives that compare people, places, or things. And um, if you compare, let's say people, places, or things, you're basically comparing one person, one thing, or one place. And then we add er to our word. But if you're comparing more than one person, then we add est, right? If there's more than one syllable, and then we add more, and we add most. So thank you very much, grade 5, for joining our class on adjectives that compare, right? And we said we have a comparative adjective as well as a superlative adjective. So till next time, have a good weekend further. Goodbye.